Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Let's get to the Spurs trivia question before we get to some more Spurs stuff. So, the Spurs have not made the playoffs for 5 consecutive seasons, the longest drought in franchise history. What is the second longest drought, Chuck?
1.
1's what you're going with?
Yeah. Did I win?
1 is correct.
Okay, cool. My
They
memory's
actually
not as
tied
shot.
1 4 times.
Wow, I would have gotten that part wrong.
So they have not made the playoffs, not including the Dallas Chaparral's time.
Okay.
Not including that, they have not made the playoffs 4 times in franchise history. 83-84, which they went 37-45. 86 to 87, they went 28-54. Then obviously David and Tim's years when they bottomed out, they got the first pick and they got the 2 best players. I thought it was fascinating. I did not realize this, that they have not made the playoffs more in the last 5 years than previously in franchise history. I did not realize that.
I did not know that either, but it sure feels like that. I know we've talked about this before, how spoiled we were, but I think that's why some of us have a problem when you start getting this, hey, they're this, they're great, they're this. It's like, no, we know what that looks like. And so it's a harder leap for people like me that are old.
Yeah, when I'm looking for trivia questions, I try and grab something that like even surprises me when I'm looking for it, and that surprised me. I thought that the Spurs had a couple of down years in the 70s and 80s, and maybe they had like a 2 to 3 year streak there where they didn't make the playoffs, but 1 year at a time basically. Even though in between the 86, 87 and then 88, 89, they made the playoffs at 31.
I know those
they
80s
made the playoffs
teams
at 31 and 51.
Like if it wasn't for the Lakers Showtime era, I mean that's more championships.
Yeah, 100%. But I just thought that was really surprising. I thought that was really surprising, and so now you have a 5-year rebuild, for lack of a better term, for the Spurs going into year 6 of this, and they're trying to break the longest drought in franchise history, and the question is, can they do it? I found an article by Forbes this week from NBA contributor Brian Toporek, and sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Brian. He says the Spurs are putting on a rebuilding clinic. He goes into the draft capital that they have right now, 17 first-round picks, more or less, or pick swaps in the next 7 years. The drafting of Victor Wembanyama, the trading of certain assets like Jakob Poeltl and DeJounte Murray and what you got back for those guys, the making of trades that don't fit your timeline. The question that we all want to know is, what is the timeline? But his hypothesis, his assertion, is that they're putting on the rebuilding clinic because they're doing it the slow way. They have a goal in mind, and they have a focus on when they want this team to compete.
I don't know that that's not anything that we haven't said around here. I don't know that I would give them 100% credit for like being the first to do this, though. I mean, all you could do is look up 35 and see Oklahoma City, and they kind of did this that way too. And obviously, Oklahoma City wasn't the first one either that's ever kind of just knocked everything over and said we're going to start from scratch. But it is a masterclass in that. It's like they're playing 5D chess, right? There's a million different ways this thing could go, and there's going to be reactions and actions and reactions. And I think the fact that they've got all this draft capital is, again, you don't know what that's going to look like 2 or 3 years from now, but you have to like the fact that there's really nobody seriously overpaid that's also cutting you off from going out and getting somebody really, really good and bringing them in to join the program when you're ready to make that leap. To answer your question, I'm not sure when they're ready to compete. I would hope it's this year. Hell, I hoped it was last year.
Yeah. My only issue with it is we don't really know if it's a masterclass in rebuilding or a clinic in rebuilding yet, because we don't know what the end result is. We can call it and say that this is going to be the model if they end up making the playoffs and end up as finals contenders for years and years and years to come. But right now, it just looks like they're doing their best to build assets, gain assets, while trying to rebuild this team. And we just don't know what the end result is going to be. So I have a problem saying that they're putting on a rebuilding clinic. Like, yes, they're putting on a clinic of acquiring assets and building a foundation.
And giving themselves
options. But is this the model? Is this how you want to rebuild a franchise? We don't know that yet because we don't know the end result of this process. So that would be
okay. I'm with you. I'm picking up what you're putting down. That's
but
good.
It is smart, suffice to say that it is smart moves what they're doing. I mean, even the trade for Harrison Ingram, where you're helping, or Harrison Barnes, excuse me, where you're helping facilitate a bigger move, and you're gaining a pick swap, and you're gaining a player that does not hamper you financially in the future. So you can maybe succeed a little bit more now, but also gives you more flexibility in 2031 with that Kings pick swap by trading the 8th pick for a 2031 pick from Minnesota, who now has no draft assets and can't build for the future with their draft capital. They are thinking that they have their team for success right now. So maybe in 7 years they bottom out. You don't know. I think that like building like that is smart, but without knowing that result, it's kind of, it's almost like crowning them before they've done anything.
Right. I go back to, I've been saying this for 2 years. It's the old model used to be you needed 2 or 3 superstars to win a championship. Now, I don't know that model necessarily works anymore. You've got to have really good players that get along and play well together and then actually play some defense too. And I don't know that just recycling these with these stars going here or there, I don't know that necessarily works anymore. So I would rather see it being done the way the Spurs are doing it, the way OKC's doing it, than, just let's grab this superstar. And I know, they've got Chris Paul coming in here, but again, to your point about Harrison Barnes, these are pieces or bridge pieces that are going to help you with your foundational stuff in terms of how to be pros, how to act like pros, how to play like pros, how to play like pros when it matters most.
Helps you maintain flexibility as well.
Yes.
Last thing I want to get to before we get out of here, there was a story by Dusty Garza actually on our the Spurs Report on our News 4 and Fox Facebook page or digital pages. Paul McKeskey, 7 feet tall. He played in the NBA for 5 seasons.
Nickname?
Was
Speed Bump.
He was a coach there for a little while as well. Basically, he recently said to an international news outlet that being so tall took a toll on his body and other players' body, and he's kind of worried for Wemby and the toll that it's going to take on Victor's. He said we've seen players like Yao Ming, Daryl Dawkins, Moses Malone, Manute Bol struggle with health issues. And now with Victor being even taller than most of them, except for Manute Bol, he's a little worried that those same health issues will pop up with a player of his size. However, with modern medicine, with the way that Wemby trains, I think he's taken out a lot of those concerns. Because I had the same ones when he was coming out. You see an anomaly like that, and you worry instantaneously, like for his feet, for his knees, for his calves, for all of the extremities that might have tissue issues, or the plantar fasciitis, which I feel like we've seen with every 7-footer since the dawn of time. But with the way that he does his calisthenics, his yoga, his stretching, all of those things to take care of his body, he's like Gumby, not Wemby. You know what I mean?
I like that. Yeah, so I think you're right. The difference between Paul McKeskey's time in the league and now is this generation has the benefit of having seen how the prior generation handled these kinds of things, right? So I think the Spurs, they're putting Victor on a pitch count, and they're doing it because he's still not fully grown. Mm-hmm. He's going to get wider, just you would think, by
he already
age.
has his offseason.
And just by age, right? Mm-hmm. He's going to fill out. And with filling out, you would assume there's going to be more of a potential to add mass, strength, all of those things. And with these training regimens, like to your point, they're going to be very smart. It's not to say that he's not going to get hurt or suffer something along the way, but they're being very judicious, knowing that this guy's got his whole career ahead of him. They're not necessarily ready to, punch down the door just yet. There's no reason when you have this much invested in a quote unquote franchise player to not go or proceed forward with anything other than really being cautious about how you go about it and be smart more than anything else.
And Don has documented on multiple occasions what Wemby and his team have done since he was 8 years old. He's done the hand exercises, the feet exercises, the ankle stretches. He's made sure that his extremities and all of those key I'm going to say pressure points for lack of a better term. Those pressure areas that we usually see 7-footers struggle with. Those are all things that he's worked on because he's tried to get ahead of the potential for injury there.
And I think too the game has changed. It's not a brawler league, and I don't want to necessarily say that because it demeans the quality of play back then, but there was a level of physicality back then that does not exist anymore.
I don't think you're demeaning it either, though. It's more of a skill league now. It's not. It's just not a.
Well, I don't even know if I would say it's that necessarily. It's more of an athlete league. I think you have better athletes top to bottom than you had back then, but the skill was pretty damn good not that long ago too. But the physicality mixed on top of that was, you knew if a guy scored one layup, he wasn't going to get another one, that he was going to get his ass knocked into the third row. Right. I'm not saying that that's the way we should proceed with everything going forward. I'm just saying it's different. So Victor has the benefit of not having other guys that are big bust on him every single game. The game has changed. It's, we've talked about it a million times before, how there's not the traditional 1 through 5 on most teams anymore. It's 5 really good athletes that are going to out-athlete the other team.